catastrophic as in other fields when it comes to human rights, fundamental freedoms, rule of law, and the democratic debate. I see Europe much more as a civilizational project than of a project in you can get partially better off economically on a certain time horizon. I mean, making economic progress is great and essential, and without economic progress, there's going to be no reversal in demographics, which are negative, the trends right now. But I really believe that if Europe drops its key foundation in its approach to the Balkans, which is it's about peace and democracy, first and foremost. And it is not paying too much attention, I would say, at this stage, or emphasizing other things. I think you may continue seeing the yields, but on a very, very short time horizon. Developments like these in this part of the world and embracing autocrats rarely end well, at least in our part of the world.
Vuce, thank you very much. Valentin, please, can you make your remarks?
Thank you very much. I will maybe bring up some unrelated issues here. One may be about the question whether Balkan leaders are really believing in rule of law. I think some don't. They all think of the destiny of Ivo Sanader. Ivo Sanader, it was rule of law. I think he's now in prison, and some others also. Then about the media freedom book, you said 1 year you didn't appear on public TV. There is one Mladen Ivanic, member of the state presidency of Bosnia and Herzegovina, a good Serb. He didn't appear on public TV in Banja Luka for 16 years. For 16 years. So what we are speaking about media freedom and democracy, 16 years of his life. Now he lost elections, but he would maybe lose anyway, but he would have at least a chance, in the pre-election period to present his ideas, but he wasn't allowed to do so. One other complaint which I can maybe say here, being an ardent European, is that we have not copied so many fantastic ideas of Europe in the Balkans. Just take Arte. Why don't we have Arte Balkans? But we have Al Jazeera Balkans, We should have Arte Balkans. And we even speak the same language here, No, not the same language. A language which is understood by everybody, okay? Arte Balkans, then Erasmus Balkans. It will start now, but we could have done it 20 years ago. So young people from Sarajevo have never been in Banja Luka, in Bijeljina, but they are going to Paris or to Barcelona on an Erasmus program. So Erasmus Balkan, just copy-paste what was done between Germany and France, between Germany and Israel, reconciliation, common history books, common government sessions. It's starting now, but much too late. So everything has to be really accelerated. We have to inject a sense of urgency into everything. Even if Valentin Inzko is wrong, but young people are leaving. So one German diplomat said, the best test would be that we are successful if people are not leaving anymore. So we have to reverse this trend. And I think there is another study by United Nations that in the year 2060, Serbia will have a population of 3.9 million. 3.9 million, if this continues, of course. And what Anna said, a better life. Simply a better life, but this includes good governance. Or in the Balkans, people would say normalan život. Normalan život, nothing else, a normal life. A normal life. And people would say, Valentin, let's have a life here like in your countries. Not to be Switzerland or rich, but just like in your countries, a normal life. And also, what I totally agree with Anna, language has to change. People don't understand the language of European Union, or bureaucracy, but people do understand European ideas. And I will now mix a little bit these European ideas, European Champions League, very popular. European Song Contest, very popular. Miss Europe, of course, also very popular. EU roaming, very popular, yeah. EU currency, euro, very popular, yeah. But we are sometimes not even selling it. We should repeat every time. Maybe we should give a professional PR company to make public statements. Because when you listen to the spokespersons of European Union sometimes, first you don't understand what he said, secondly it's very technical sometimes, yeah. But the language has to come back, yeah, to the people would understand it better. And now we have an all-time high in European Union of support, 62%. It's due to America, it's due to Brexit, but we have a huge support, but I think we could even do much better. So that's about it. Yeah, thank you very much.
Mr. Fabrizi, I want to thank you in the name of all the people here and in the name of all Serbs, basically, for doing a wonderful job that you're doing. And the comments which were made here were made with the aim of making that path even more effective, cutting it shorter and adding a new, how can I say, juice and life into the process. And definitely the Serbian people are fully committed to joining the European Union as soon as possible. Is it just possible, because our time is very short, because you have made comments that I ask Anna. 3 seconds, okay, very
60 seconds to thank you, but just to respond to your challenge of franchise. I think it's as fascinating can be. My reply would be no. This country deserves to be part of the EU, is part of Radio Europe. I don't think the Serbs should accept the idea to be in a suboptimal category because they are not able to be or to act, to behave, to have an economy, to have the justice system as the other people of the European Union. Thank you.
So 2 minutes, one for Europe and one for Serbia or Balkans. European Union has its own crisis, and European Union is an entity, but each European people has its own problems. We haven't spoken a lot for that today, but we all know that there is populism, there is nationalism, there are problems in many European countries, there is anti-European movements, there are people in many countries which are against any kind of enlargement. We know everything. If we take this into account, should we be pessimistic and say, yes, the Europeans really pretend about Balkans? This is not the case. We can see behind the words that they are not sincere with Serbia or with other countries. My understanding is no, we must be optimistic because things are changing, and Balkans have in front of them 10 years. We cannot imagine what is going to happen in 5 years. So there must be a very concrete goal. Whatever happens in European Union, whatever Juncker or other president says today, maybe it would be different tomorrow. But what it matters is that there will be a very concrete goal for Serbia to complete with the criteria. And this must be a national goal because the procedure matters. As a Greek, I would tell you that I think that one of the most important things would be Turkey to come back and to be a member of the European Union, because the only way out for our region is all of us to be members of the European Union. We are different. We are people with big differences. But we have, after so many wars in this continent and after so much blood, we have a common belief, peace and prosperity. And we can do it only through European Union. So be optimistic and be very, very stable and passionate with this goal. Coming now to Serbia. You know that I'm coming from a country with a huge crisis, economic crisis, which became a political crisis, a social crisis, a crisis of principles. I belong to this minority, unfortunately, from Greek people who believe that the whole problem is our problem. It is a Greek problem. It is what we have done wrongly in our country. And we must not all the time blame the others, blame the European Union, blame the neoliberalism, blame the Americans, blame everybody in the world. It is our responsibility. So, Serbian, Greece, Montenegro, Bosnia-Herzegovina are not children. I mean, they are countries with responsibilities.
I'm sorry, I would not agree. I think that the elites, by the level of responsibility, are young children.
So, this could be for other countries as well. You can see elites in very big countries, even the biggest country in the world, which behaves like a child. So we can find it everywhere. But each country has its own responsibility. So I read very well, because of this round table, I read the report of the Commission about the media, about justice system, etc. Of course, it is the European polite language, but it is very sincere. It is obvious that there is a problem with media in Serbia, and the opposition can work on that and explain the European position in the European paper, and pushes the government and people to understand that something goes wrong with this issue, because there is a report from the European Union. They don't say lies, they don't try to present things in a different way, they are just polite, in a polite language. So, just to conclude, I believe I agree with Sam. The answer to the question, franchising or not, is no, because
not even as a transitory state,
no.
faster reform inside the society.
No. And why? Because as I said at the beginning, nobody knows what is going to happen in Europe. We have now 5 scenarios: more Europe, less Europe, to stay as we are, cycles with different kind of power, etc. Nobody knows what is going to happen. But what everybody knows is that even if we have cycles in Europe, there will be a level of criteria which will be obligatory for everybody. So whatever happens in the future, Serbia must be ready. And ready means that 23 and 24 chapters, first of all, must close. And this is, so rule of law is the first priority.
Thank you so much for your remarks. Mr. Dabrowski, please.
First short remarks: the population is not only Serbian or Western Balkans problem, this is a problem of entire Europe, North America, and also part of Asia like Japan, Korea, and now also China is about to enter this. And this is a very serious problem, economic, social, and political, but is, I would say, irrelevant to the future or lack of the future of European integration. Second thing, I would like to very much agree with Vuk Jeremic about that European integration is not only economic project, this is civilization project. And my impression is that, for example, in the previous new member states, political elites very often forgot about this in public communication, putting emphasis only on some short-term economic gains. And this is, I think, big problems. And this civilization progress, in my opinion, cannot be achieved under this franchise variant which you advertise. Actually, you are already in this stage. I would say that the current candidate countries, especially negotiating one like Serbia, are in some sort of I would say, advanced association with the EU. But it's still not enough to anchor social and political systems for long term to this direction. Thank you very much.
That's my point. The intensity of the relation is weak enough that it does not really change the society. And in that sense, I was advocating for a structure which would be effective for change, which would, in spite of maybe the unwillingness of the elites, push our societies in the right direction. I would just like to ask Mrs. Negre, the regional manager of the European Investment Bank. She wanted to make a comment, and with this we will have to definitely close this exciting session.
Yeah. Thank you, Simon, for a very interesting breakfast. It was great discussions, very lively morning. I'm Dubravka Negra, for those who don't know me, and I'm heading the largest multilateral international financial institution here for the region, which is entirely EU-owned. Entirely. And we have been here for 40 years, not for 5, 10, 15 or 20, because member states ask us to do so. Let's not talk about billions, because there are many billions that we are investing here and financing, but let's talk about impact that it makes for people on the ground. And impact is very big. And if we want that impact to be even bigger, I think the institutions of these countries need to be very exigent with all the investors, because the needs are very important and very large, that we need to cooperate with others, with other IFIs, with other member states, with other donors, with other countries. But if we want the impact to be bigger and more important for the citizens, then the institutions of these countries need to be very exigent when it comes to values, when it comes to competition, when it comes to transparency, when it comes to protecting environment, when it comes to protecting social standards. Because this is what will make difference and what will make people here believe in even more that they should stay here. And by asking other investors to respect those rules, that for us it comes naturally to respect them and to be exigent on those, is that the difference will be made for the people in particular. Thank you very much.
Dubravka, thank you very much for your remarks. I want to thank all the panelists warmly for this very exciting discussion. And with this, we adjourn. At 12:30 is the Vice Prime Minister opening the conference. Mr. Ivica Dačić.
Dame i gospodo, hvala što ste danas bili sa nama na ovoj divnoj sesiji Leaders Breakfast. Zamolit ću vas, ako nije problem, da svi napustite salu, jer sada menjamo strukturu i možete se poslužiti kafom, čajem ispred i za neki 20 minuta počinje svečano otvaranje ekonomskog samita. Hvala puno. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being on this Leaders Breakfast session today with us. Please, I would like to ask you to leave the room because we need to change the setup. In front you can take a cup of coffee or tea, and in about 20 minutes room will be ready for the opening session. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, good morning, Kalimera, Dobrodošli, Dobar dan. Thank you very much for coming, Your Excellencies, Ambassadors, dear friends, distinguished guests, we thank you all. Welcome to this pre-opening session of our 18th Annual Economic Summit of Serbia, a conference that we host with no interruption since May of 2001. I'm Simeon Tsomokos, and I'm part of the organizing committee of this event. We will thank a little later at the opening session our sponsors and supporters, but allow me to say a word of appreciation and many thanks to Visa, our partner which promotes the cashless society concept in the region, and actually we have a very important conference on Wednesday for this. And of course I would like to thank Eurobank, which constantly supports our events, and this one particularly. I think it is important for Serbia and the region that we continue the dialogue on the eventual accession of the Western Balkans, or the Southeast Europe if you like, to the family of the European Union. Many thanks to the speakers of this morning's session for their participation, especially those who travel from abroad, Anna, Marek, Dr. Insko, Goran, and of course I would like to thank the Ambassador, Mr. Fabrici, and Vuk Jeremic for joining us this morning. We are looking forward to a most stimulating discussion in an hour and a half. Milan, I think we need to adjourn sometime around 11:30, the latest by 11:45, so that we prepare this room for the opening session at 12:30. With this, I pass the session to Dr. Mila Parivodic, but let's give an applause so that we warm up a little bit the room. Thank you all, the speakers, for joining us this morning. We thank you very much. Milane, please.
Thank you, Mr. Tsamokos. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I will start with a small remark. This is the 18th Serbia summit, and the first one was actually very soon after the changes of the 5th of October, when Milosevic was toppled down. And Mr. Tsamokos immediately came to Serbia, and in the 18 consecutive years, we have these conferences. And thinking back, looking at legal history, not even our constitutions lasted 18 years. Our three last constitutions lasted less than 18 years. So I really want to congratulate you, Simeon, for your friendship to Serbia and for the development of economic and diplomatic ties between Greece and Serbia, and for all your hard work here. Please give Mr. Simeon Tsamokos a round of applause. So, at today's Leaders' Breakfast, we have a group of very distinguished speakers. We have His Excellency Sam Fabrizi, head of the European Union delegation in Serbia, Dr. Valentin Incko, the long-standing High Representative for Bosnia and Herzegovina, Mrs. Anna Diamantopoulou, President of Dictio, a network for the reform in Greece and Europe, and Mrs. Diamantopoulou was the EU Commissioner for Employment and Social Affairs, and before that, Minister of Development, Competitiveness and Shipping in Greece, and before that, Minister of Education, Lifelong Learning and Religious Affairs, one of the most prominent Greek politicians. Thank you, Mrs. Diamantopoulou, for coming here. Mr. Goran Svilanovic, Secretary General of the Regional Cooperation Council, Mr. Vuk Jeremic, former Minister of Foreign Affairs and the President of the People's Party, which has yesterday celebrated the first anniversary, and Dr. Marek Dabrowski, the non-resident scholar at Bruegel from Brussels. With this, my name is Milan Parivodic. I'm an attorney at law, practicing in Belgrade, former Minister of International Economic Relations of Serbia. Our breakfast topic is the Western Balkans, stabilizations and integration. I will first give the word to Mr. Fabrizi, whose job is actually to develop relations between Serbia and the European Union, to intensify them, and to bring Serbia closer to the European Union in all ways which we want this to happen. So, Mr. Fabrizi, please make your introductory remarks.
Well, thank you, Chair, and it's a great pleasure to be with you this morning, this panelists, and in this room to open the 18th Economic Summit. I think the two elements that is subject of this introductory panel, so stability and integration, are two key elements that are mutually reinforcing. The process of European Union integration is contribute to the stability of the region. At the same time, the stability is a prerequisite of an integration process. In 2018, the European Union has brought back this region and its European perspective at the center of our agenda. And if you look, I look at you, what I should do? There's an echo. Should be closer? Far. All right. Okay. Excellent. Sorry. So if you look at the 2018, we have, as a EU, delivered an important policy strategy. It's called the Western Balkan Strategy. And for those who have the time to read it, the initial quote is from President Juncker: "If we want more stability in our neighborhoods, then we must also maintain a credible enlargement perspective for the Western Balkans." Again, the concept of stability and integration appear up front of our reasoning. The strategy is well known in all this detail. We have discussed in the past. Is a merit-based strategy, is a regional strategy, has a time frame period in front of us, define a clear set of principles based with the idea there is a need of strong political wills, credible and sustainable reforms, solution of dispute in the region. The matching of the EU idea, the Commission, and with the leaders of the European Council and on the region happened in May in Sofia during the summit. The first after 15 years, the one in Thessaloniki in 2003, and basically the understanding has been that there was a mutual reconfirmation of this approach on both sides, with the idea to work together, and also in a process that need also to be anchored to some concrete avenue of work. It's not a process left in the vagueness. So let's work on rule of law and governance, migration and security, socio-economic development, youth, connectivity, digital agenda, reconciliation. The June Council, European Council set a number of important issues, including the definition of a path forward, possible opening of negotiation for Skopje and Tirana in 2009. In this strategy, in this period, Serbia is, and I move to Serbia, is well anchored to this enlargement process. In the strategy has been recognized as a front runner. Our annual report in April made a photograph of where Serbia is in its accession process. A number of issues has been made on the rule of law, governance, democracy, human rights, migration, security. So it's a comprehensive package. But if I can focus a bit on the economy, which is, I believe, is the subject and the focus of this audience, the report recognized the commitment of the Serbian authorities to create a functioning market economy and important progress in implementing economic reforms and in securing macroeconomic and fiscal stability. Inflation is down, prices are stable, employment is also down, and a very good figure of growth we can be registered already in this first 3 quarters of 2018. Economic growth, budgetary surplus again, increase in trade and investment. Of course, the report also saw what still need to be done. Additional effort needed to increase the business environment, tackle more decisively corruption, high share of informal economy, parafiscal charges, completing the restructuring of public companies, complete the reform on public administration to make it more accountable, more professional, more transparent, to deliver better services for the citizen. So basically the positive link or the positive readout of Serbia, especially in the economic area, show us that the link between stability and integration is working. As I said, the economy is growing. 66% of Serbia exports goes to the European Union. 62% of Serbia imports come from the European Union. The Serbia export to the US tripled in the last 9 years. 73% of foreign direct investment are from the EU. So the more Serbia is closer to the EU, the better economy is geared and is working. Of course, no complacency. The numbers need to be consolidated, need to be sustainable, need to reduce the gap. We have open 14 chapters of negotiation so far. Further will be hopefully open soon. So my conclusion, and after we'll leave the floor to other colleagues, is the stability is good for integration, but integration goes well beyond stability. I think we need to add another element. In an EU process, the European Union is a transformative driver for more stability, but also more prosperity, more security, and more democracy. So as long as the European Union remain and should remain a national project for all Serbia, for the government, for the opposition, for the NGOs, for the business community, this is the project and the path to go forward. Certainly my job, the job of my delegation is to support this process to make it faster and deeper. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I think that one sentence particularly resonated with me, what you said: integration goes beyond stability. Integration is a complex process which is much more value-driven than just stability. Dr. Valentinitsko, would you please make your introductory remark?
Thank you very much. I also will have some good figures from Bosnia and Herzegovina, like Mr. Fabrizi has shown us that there is progress. But first of all, allow me to say a few sentences in Serbian language, because I started my diplomatic career 36 years ago in Belgrade. Ja sam bio mladi ataše na Austrijskoj ambasadi 82. godine, bila su to fantastična vremena i to je bio dobar grad za karijeru. Samo ako pomislite ko je sada vanjsko-politički savjetnik predsjednika Macrona, Philippe Etienne, isto je bio moj kolega 82. godine na Francuskoj ambasadi. Matematičar, imao je sve diplomatske škole u Francuskoj, a sada je savjetnik gospodina Macrona, predsjednika Macrona. Ja sam inače radio ukupno 20 godina u bivšoj Jugoslaviji, bio sam ambasador Austrije u Ljubljani, u Sarajevu, posmatrač OSS-a u Novom Pazaru i u Beogradu 4 godine. So it's my big pleasure to be back in Belgrade after 36 years, and today's gathering is an occasion to discuss not only where the Balkans stands vis-à-vis the EU, but also about specific challenges and opportunities it faces. And as my colleague said here, Sam, that it is also a possibility to raise our voice in support of regional connectivity, cooperation and partnership and unity, and this is actually a very crystal clear win-win situation. Nobody can lose if we cooperate better in the region. And Mr. Svilanovic will later say, integrate to integrate, yeah? Of course, integrate in the region to integrate into Brussels. As High Representative of the International Community for Bosnia and Herzegovina, but also as a long-serving Austrian diplomat, I have no dilemma. There is no, and there should be no, alternative to the Western Balkans integration to the European Union. I have just one small comment to this integration. Being an ardent European, a small comment, and you will not mind, it should be faster. I have a feeling there is no enough sense of urgency. Yeah? And even if I'm wrong in my assessment, young people are just leaving our countries. Bosnia and Herzegovina lost 100,000 young people in 5 years. In Serbia, I think it's 30,000 per year. It also happens in Croatia. So a sense of urgency has to be injected in our good strategies which we have. But of course, I'm not in charge of European Union. I was EUSR, but now I'm just only a High Representative. So Bosnia and Herzegovina made some remarkable progress the last 23 years, from a socialist economy to a market economy, with some problems, but still with a market economy, from a Yugoslav republic into an independent state, from a country where there was war, into a country where we have no military conflicts for the last 23 years. The progress which Bosnia and Herzegovina made on its European path is quite remarkable. It is not yet a candidate country, but nobody believed 2 years ago when Bosnia and Herzegovina got the so-called questionnaire with 3,300 questions, that there would be not 9,900 answers. But there have been there have been 3,300 answers, and the European Union has now sent 600 additional questions. It took some time, but basically all these questions have been answered and will be answered also, the rest of it. And then Bosnia and Herzegovina could be a candidate country soon. If we speak about the Thessaloniki agenda, it was already mentioned, 2003, and if Bosnia and Herzegovina will be a member state in 2033, for example, it's just a speculation, could be earlier, could be later, but then Bosnia and Herzegovina would have waited for 30 years. This is my concern, you know, that things have to be accelerated. If you have something what you can reach, even the best in life, in 30 years, it loses some attraction, you know. So all these processes have to be accelerated, and maybe there should be also some exemptions made or more creativity used for the EU enlargement process, like why not open chapter 23, 24 about rule of law immediately? I think there's no logic reason that you have to wait for candidate status to open these chapters on rule of law. Because rule of law you always need, if you're a candidate or not, yeah. So this could be renamed, but started immediately, you know. Or to front-load certain projects. If Bosnia and Herzegovina would get billions as a member state, it's too late. It has to get this support now to develop its economy, etc. Now I would like to also quote some figures, like my colleague here. We have a very solid economic growth in Bosnia and Herzegovina. It is over 3%. We have export growth of 13%, yeah, and also imports are growing by 8%. Industrial production is also growing, and the biggest growth we have in the area of tourism, it is 20%. With my own country, Austria, Bosnia and Herzegovina even has a trade surplus. Bosnia and Herzegovina also would fulfill, if it was a member state of the European Union, it would fulfill already today the criteria for the euro. Because there is almost no inflation, the currency is very stable, and it is strictly pegged to the euro. So basically, two convertible marks are €1, and this from the very beginning. Regretfully, we still have quite a high number of unemployment, especially under the youth. It is about 60%, but figures also are going down in this regard, I think by 7% last year. The indebtedness of Bosnia and Herzegovina is very low. I think it is the lowest in the region. Budget indebtedness is about 30%. And there's also liquidity in the central bank, so that these figures are rather good. My recommendation for Mr. Hahn and others, Gio is my friend, of course, being Austrian, and we know each other very long. My recommendation would be early candidate status, but late membership once the conditions are met. I compare this candidate status with a sort of having a fiancé. Yeah? You are planning the future. You are taking a mortgage for a common apartment. You have certain obligations. And so this would also be helpful for Bosnia and Herzegovina, a candidate status. I would also finally like to mention a few achievements of the first decade in Bosnia and Herzegovina, when international community was more robust than today. Today we have the philosophy of local ownership, which is a good one, but it doesn't work always. It worked in the Baltics, but it doesn't work always in the Balkans. Yeah. So, but anyway, we had quite a few successes. There was no flag after the war. There was no common currency. There was no common passport. There was no border police. There was no tax authority. Tax authority, of course, is very unpopular, but it's highly efficient. Yeah. And there was 3 armies and 2 ministries of defense. and we have now one army and one Ministry of Defense. Instead of 3 ministries, based on Dayton, we have now 9. So there was progress, and we should not forget about it. In the first decade after the war, when international community was a little bit more robust than today. I think we should not be scared of being robust. In my own country, Austria, we had 10 years Allied forces. Germany had 45 years of limited sovereignty, also with Allied forces. And can we imagine Germany without Allied forces in 45? Who started Nuremberg trials? Who brought the Marshall Plan? So foreign presence can be beneficial, but it should be limited, of course, yeah. And it would be also my own success to liquidate myself as High Representative in Bosnia-Herzegovina, yeah. But, of course, international community has to leave behind a stable country. Now, very briefly, in a few sentences, the general elections, which we had on 7th of October of this month. Of course, some parties who have a national, background have been strongest. However, we have quite a few changes at lower level, at cantonal level. It could happen, for example, in the most important and biggest canton, Sarajevo, in Bosnia-Herzegovina, that we would have government without the traditional Izetbegovic party, SDA, in power. Yeah? It reached 25%. SDA has 25%. It is the strongest party, but there are also 75% left. You have to get also partners, for coalition partners. Yeah? So there were changes at lower level. At the top level, the traditional parties are strongest, HDZ, SDA, and SNSD. And it is still early days to say about future coalitions, because we have not yet official results of the last elections. Yeah. In any case, what we wish for Bosnia-Herzegovina, we wish for our own countries as well, a stable and prosperous region with a clear European perspective. This is in the interest of all. It should also be in the interest of egoistic interest of European countries, because if we speak about rule of law, if we speak about human trafficking, drugs trafficking, if we speak about weapons trafficking, which is a big concern in some Western countries, you know, it is in our own egoistic interest that this doesn't happen, that we have a stronger rule of law also in Southeastern Europe. Having spent almost 20 years now in former Yugoslavia as a diplomat, I must say these are most fantastic people I met in my life. Yeah. They are very gifted people, extremely gifted. And if you take just 2 or 3 examples, the head of Telecom in Austria was Boris Nemčić from Sarajevo. Then in the House of Lords you have Arminka Helic. Then you have the youngest minister in Sweden, the youngest minister of education was Aida Hadžialić. She was 27, yeah. So these people are extremely gifted, extremely successful. Regretfully, many times they have to go abroad. But let us create a climate that they can be successful also at home. And in this regard, I see a bright future also for Southeastern Europe. Thank you.
Mr. Insko, thank you very much for this very illuminating statement. In my opinion, you said some very critical things. Why not open chapter 23 and 24 immediately? Why would it hurt the European Union to have more rule of law in Bosnia? Bureaucracy probably is the answer, because it's not by the rules. And I'll just give you an example of the rules. Serbia started its accession process sometime in 2003, 2001, 2002, 2003. In 2004, negotiations for the Stabilization and Association Agreement have commenced. And it came into force, the Stabilization, the Association Agreement, which is one of the probably 2-3 stages of integrating into the European Union. So it was the negotiation started in 2004, it came into force in 2013. So it took 9 years for a stabilization and association agreement. Look what Germany did before, from 45 until 54, after Second World War. Just to compare what can be done in a short time span. You said that candidate status is something like having a fiancé. Yeah, my association first is maybe apprenticeship. And an apprentice cannot learn without the craftsman in the shop, being in the shop. So if you want to have ministers of police, ministers of public administration, ministers of justice, and so forth, by European standards, why not bring them to attend the sessions? They don't have to be in the most secretive sessions of the European Union regarding external security, strategic affairs, and so forth. But imagine, how would the ruling people in a country behave when picking ministers if they knew that those ministers would be attending regularly the meetings in the European Union along with the other commissioners of the European Union? I think that they would be probably better picked than they are picked in this region. You also mentioned very gifted people. And I would completely agree with you. And just a mention of Ivo Andrić and Meša Selimović, who are some of the finest writers in the world, not in this region, but in the world, just to give the depth of the talent which can be found in this region. Madam Diamantopoulou, would you please make your statement, having all the experience of Balkan politics in Greece and European Union top table politics?
Thank you very much, Milan. Of course, I would like to congratulate Simeon, because when a conference continues for 18 years in so many difficulties and has survived, it means that it is an institution, a national institution, so congratulations. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, I am from Greece. And I would like to start my introduction saying that my grandmother was born in a village next to Aliakmon River in northern Greece, in Western Macedonia, and the name of this village is Serbia. In this village, 100 years ago, Greeks, Turks, Serbs, and Bulgarians were living together. And in these 100 years, there were wars, and a lot of blood in Balkans. And today here we are. There is a negotiation for almost every country in Balkans and in Western Balkans to be member of the European Union. So we have to be optimistic. There are so many difficulties, but it is a good moment for Balkans if we take into account our history. There is a concept, there is a perception in European Union, in the people of the European Union, in many countries, that here in Balkans we live with our ghosts, with our nationalistic, religious ghosts, and this is what matters for people. But this is not true. I mean, people in Balkans are people as everywhere in the world. What they do want is to have a good life, as simple as that. The very big rate of migration, we heard the numbers in Bosnia-Herzegovina, in Serbia, in all other countries in Balkans, the rate of migration is very high. And it means that people really want a better life. They want a better job, they want education for their children, they want a welfare state, they want security. So they easily leave their countries. It's not something like nationalism who keeps them here. They do want a better life. So this is what we must have in mind when we are talking about procedures, agreements, projects, budgets, enlargement, etc. So the main issue is for each person in Balkan, for each citizen in Balkan. It is stability, so how to feel secure, growth, so how to have a job for my family and me, and democracy, to feel that my human rights and my political rights are protected. Each kind of project, European or other project, which is in place, must ensure that it addresses citizens' immediate and tangible concerns. And this is what I said again, these three words: stability, growth, and democracy. At the same time, what is going on in Balkans? There are many and different international players. It is the European Union, it is NATO, it is Russia, it is China, and of course there are member states, European member states by themselves who have their own interests. I very much believe that the international institutions have their collective, they express collective interests. They work for collective interests. Somebody can agree or disagree with the goals of an international organization, but an international organization, as the European Union is, has collective interest. Countries which work and play a role in the region have their own national interests, because each country in the world, being it very big as China, or as Germany, or as France, or small, they all have, and this is the right thing to do, they have to prioritize their national interest. So, European Union here in this area expresses the collective interest of the European people, because it is for the interest of European people and European countries for Balkans to be, for the whole of Balkans, all countries of Balkans to be members of the European Union. I had the experience of being members of the European Commission during the enlargement. So at that time, 10 new member states joined the European Union. Things were very difficult, extremely difficult, as they are now. We can see many, of course there are different issues from country to country, but there were national conflicts, internal conflicts, people were totally confused. It was a new period, of a transitional period. But what was important, it was that this enlargement procedure was a journey to democracy, a journey to institutions, a journey to liberal economy. So I think that what it is very important here in Western Balkans is to be understood, not only by the governments, but the people at the same time, that this is a mutual interest. It is not something that the Europeans give to the Balkan people. No. It is very important for the peace in Europe for Europeans to have Balkans in the European Union. So there is a mutual interest here. I would like to make 2 points, because it is such a very general issue, so you can focus in many different areas. I will focus on 2. First one concerns the European Union, and the other one China. Having the experience of being a commissioner and a national politician, I know very well some of the mistakes that European Union does. And I'm not going to be in depth in political decisions or institutions, but something very simple, the language with which we address to people. Please think, here we are diplomats and politicians and people from enterprises. Think a single person, a teacher in a village. What does it mean for him or her? The accession procedure, SAA, SAP, all these acronyms that nobody understands anything, or the numbers, the employment rate, the growth rate, it means nothing. So it is important for the European Union bodies and for the government to have an obligatory cooperation in order to explain in a different way what is going on. And I'm giving an example. The ambassador has already referred to important issues concerning the open of the chapters and of the implementation of SAA. But let us think a different way to explain things. How important is this agreement, the strategy to the successful accession process, as Juncker has named it, for the investors? How important is for Serbia to implement the SAA when the investors can really come to the country, because things will change, and things will change because of the justice system will change. Investors will feel more safe. And what it means when Serbian people or Montenegro people have more investments, it's very important for the everyday people because they can have a job. So it is very important for the workers. And then it is very important for the consumers because the consumers can have better quality of products with better prices. And it is better for the taxpayers because the taxpayers will have different value for their money because the public works will have a quality and standards of the European Union. But for all these things, they must have small and quick victories and results. And these results must be in the first, in the news every day and in the first page of the newspapers. This is something that we haven't done in the past, and I think that this is very important because in this case there is a mutual pressure. People understand what is changing in their lives and they press their government to be quicker, what exactly Mr. Inchko said, that we need to accelerate. And the government understands very well how important it is for people and they accelerate as well. My second point, and you understand that I just touch upon on some issues, is concerning China, which is a big issue. It's a big theme, not only Balkans, but in many European countries. And we know very well that this Belt and Road Initiative for Balkans. I think that we have to take into account and to discuss on what EBRD, the Bank for Investments in Europe, has done in Balkans, because it has an experience of 25 years here. And EBRD has commissioned a report, and has presented this report it is an independent report, and it has presented it concerning the development of the Balkan Silk Road. So there are three issues. The first one, I will focus on three main areas of the report. The first one, it maps the progress of the Belt and Road Initiative in different countries. So somebody can see what is going on in Serbia, in Bosnia-Herzegovina, in Montenegro, in Skopje, everywhere. It is interesting to see this map because in many of the projects there are no budget. I mean, the budget is not well known and is not in public. The second issue is that, of course, the report argues that this availability of below-market loans to finance new infrastructure and any kind of infrastructure, high-level highway constructions, power plant, renovation of ports, etc., is welcomed by all countries because it is difficult for them to find money for infrastructure. And the third point is that it raises concerns among critics who question emerging levels of debt dependency of Chinese providers, which is very important for the future, and about China's business transparency. I think that since these countries are in the transition period, and it's very important for them to fight corruption, to put new standards in their public works and in their public tents, etc. It is important not to confuse again procedures and to have infrastructure or loans with no standards and rules. So I think that what it can be done, it would be a win-win combination, and this combination could be and mixing and sharing of know-how of EBRD, which works for here in Balkans and has the European experience of standards, and at the same time to combine this know-how with the financial investment determination and resources of Chinese companies. I focused on two different issues, the European Union, which is stability and growth and democracy at the same time through the procedures, and China, which brings fresh money and is very important for the area, because I really believe that growth and change in everyday life is what will be the main force for change and acceleration in Balkans. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna. Frankly, I didn't completely understand what was your proposal. EBRD working with Chinese companies? Did I understand you correctly?
No, I think that there must be a combination at the governmental level that the Chinese investment will be implemented by standards that will be set by EBRD.
Chinese companies will work by the, for example, procurement standards of EBRD. Yes. Well, that topic that you have just tackled, China and the Belt Road Initiative and cheaper money and the cheaper labor, that is a huge issue. That is definitely a huge issue, and I think that is something that we'll maybe also mention on some other panels. But it's the difference between market and state capitalism, and how will the markets react to state capitalism of China? That is the essential question when you have a Chinese East Anglia company. What do you do then? On the other side, you have typical markets companies which raise money on the capital markets, and they have to fight against those companies which are owned partly or totally by the state. And
we are going to discuss it. It's a very big. I think it is coming.
It's a huge issue.
It's a problem that is coming with huge impact in not only in this era, but in Eastern Europe as well.
And I do completely agree with you that the language which the European Union uses is, and I think there is a strong competition between some U.S. contracts and European Union administrative language. What is the most boring languages in the world, you know? It really, it's out of touch with the common people, and your key point to understand was to impose an obligation on national governments to give clear and simple explanations of every small victory which is achieved on the way towards the European Union. So
not only the government, but the government and the European Union. I mean, the ambassador can do it with the minister, because I very much believe that people can understand that Europe is very important for everyday life, and government will be pushed by the people to accelerate if they understand that it's very important. But absolutely. EU must be there in the frame, not a good government. This was the case in all member states, in my country, in each member state for years and years. When there was something good, it was the government. When there was something bad, it was the European Union. And it was catastrophic for the European Union, and you can see it, we can see it now, when the European people really don't love Europe, don't want Europe. This was the case for years and years. After the end of the European Council, we have this famous interviews of the leaders. So each leader starts with the victories succeeded, the national victories succeeded in the European Council. But this is a big mistake. What the European Council always agrees is a balance between national interests, and this is the European interest, the balance of national interests.
And when we look at infrastructure, it appears that China, which is 10,000 kilometers away, is more interested than the European Union in developing infrastructure here in some way. In some way. That's not a right statement, but we could argue about it. Absolutely, absolutely. I'm just absolutely, yes, thank you. So our next speaker is Mr. Goran Svilanovic, Secretary General of the Regional Cooperation Council. Goran, please take.
Thank you very much. I'd like to express my gratitude to Simeon for organizing such a beautiful birthday party to me. Thank you very much, Simeon. Thanks a lot. I did not expect this. Well, I've just turned 55 and I'm very happy to, but only 18 in this beautiful company. Thank you very much for the invitation, Milan, colleagues in the panel, dear guests from the business community in Serbia. I'd like to say a few words on some of the issues that have been mentioned here. I'd like to speak about depopulation mentioned by Valentin, of course about European integration mentioned by everybody. I'd like to refer on China as well. This was a big year for the region, as after many years, after Thessaloniki 2003, we finally had EU Western Balkan Summit again. I believe that I'm the only person in the room who was in both Thessaloniki Summit as well as in Sofia Summit. And I like to try to put the things clear, at least the way I understand them. And I'd like everyone to think of what has happened in the EU Western Balkan Summit in Sofia. The whole region was speaking in one voice. And the message of the region was, we are aware that the time has changed after financial crisis, Brexit, migration crisis, and that there will be a completely different European Union tomorrow, starting as of next year, parliamentary elections for European Parliament. Therefore, we as a region wanted to send a message that we see ourselves as a part of the change of European Union, that the accession should be seen as one of the elements that needs to be considered while the politicians and the people in the EU discuss and consider the different European Union. I'm very much sorry to tell you, we have failed. We have failed to convince the leaders of the EU, at least all of them. So there was not a decision along this idea. The decision is different. The decision is basically by the Council, not the Commission. Leave the Commission aside. Commission is a friend. Commission is a battery. Commission is with us in the process of reforms. But the Council has decided, no, first we will decide on ourselves, and only then, eventually, maybe, at certain point, whether you are going to be part of the Union or not. This is bold what I've said, but it's basically the message. At this point in time, the Council, the leaders, have not agreed to take into consideration accession as a part of the reform process of European Union. So this is reality. Therefore, the 2025 as a year has been deleted. Credible communication on credible enlargement strategy was never discussed by the Council. Unfortunately, something we are referring at is a paper of the Commission, very important, the best we've seen in years, but has not been even discussed, not to mention approved by the European Council, meaning the Member States didn't say yes to this document. And now all our efforts are geared by the document which has not been adopted by those who are gods of the EU. This is reality. In this reality, I believe we need to continue pushing for the membership. So we have no different options, to be very frank. We need to continue reform, we need to put political pressure, we need to show our better face in order to eventually convince the people the citizens of the EU, and finally leaders of the EU, or vice versa, to decide in favor of the accession. At this point in time, coming back to what you said, Milan, I'll tell you. Since 2000, there was one meeting in which our line ministers have been invited by their fellow colleagues, only on migration, by ministers of interior, 2 years back, and that's all. This is also reality. So in 20 years, they're inviting fellow colleagues once. And it was the situation which was burning for them and for us. And we've been seen then as a part of the solution, and we were, particularly this country was taking a lead, actually. And I'm not even sure whether you understand. There are 200 girls and boys who just enrolled in Serbia, the first class, this September, coming from Syria. 200 of them. They've started Syria. Coming from, yes, migrants. There are 200 of them who just started education in Serbia. We should welcome them. But we should be aware. What I'm talking about is different union is coming, different partnerships, as I've seen. Ambassador Carl Scott here, partnerships are going to be different, including the very important one for me, the transatlantic one, being at this point in time changed from different angles. So this is a moment in time in which many things have been changed or are about to change in the coming years. Coming back to what you said, Ms. Diamantopoulou, if you look into this city, 3 remarkable investments. Chinese bridge, Belgrade waterfront, Arab money, and a bridge in Novi Sad, EU money. And we should be grateful. And it's not the only one, it's big. And there are many companies. Only yesterday, we've opened a Turkish company in Serbia. Days before, there have been many coming from Italy or Germany. So this is the reality of this country. The figures are high, as Ambassador Fabrizi has explained. The trade is going to and with European Union, but with the others as well, gradually. I just wanted to say how complex it is to really guide the nation through the process in which the magnet of the EU is not as strong as it was when I was in the office, 2000. It's completely different union, completely different world. Saying that the world is different, I'd like to invite both Vuk and Cory, who spent some time in the United Nations. When you sit in the UN, one of the issues globally you are faced with is overpopulation. Coming back to the government of Serbia, one of the issues you are faced with is depopulation. So it's a completely different scene. The figures mentioned here, yes, there are between 30 and 50, 60,000 of people who are leaving this country. They're also leaving Bosnia and Herzegovina. They're also leaving Albania. They're leaving each and every one around us. The UN forecast for Serbia is that by 2050 we're going to lose 23% of population. So we're currently counting 7 million, we're going to be less. Albania, by the way, will lose 32%, so it's not only our problem. I can offer another figure. The number of medical doctors who have left Bulgaria in Serbia in 2017 is equal, which sends a message that not even the membership solves every problem we are faced with. Therefore, we need to dig deep and to respect every investment coming into this country. We need to promote and fight to bring them in and to respect every penny. Although, I'd like to be clear, not every investment is investment really. And when we speak about China, it's loans. And there we have to be clear. But please, you mentioned EBRD. China is, since years back, shareholder or EBRD. Currently, there is a debate in the European Union whether China will be invited to join Western Balkans Investment Framework. Meaning, it's the key body in the EU which channels the money for the Balkans, whether they will be invited to be part of this. I'm not taking sides. It's not yet been decided, but it is being discussed currently. So let us see what is the end result. So it is a big issue, and not only for the Balkans, not only for Eastern Europe, it's for Europe as such. Therefore, following your idea, I would like to offer my 4 caveats when it comes to investments from others, including China. 1, I would really invite the European Union to use the existing leverage when it comes to our countries, and insist on these 4 to be, if possible, at least 2 out of 4 in every contract with the others. 1 is competitiveness. So the clause, meaning whether we should respect the procurement rules that we are bound by while negotiating with the EU. 1. 2, whether the environmental clause will be part of the deal. So whether the environmental standards are also respected. The third, I think very important, is whether we can have a partnership with the companies from our country as well as European countries while making these deals. Why am I saying this? Because I think that we are actually, whatever survey you check, the people are looking at the EU. They have no doubts. Therefore, there is still certain leverage that needs to be used in order to define the standards, because what they're looking at is the social economic model, lifestyle. They're looking at the number of people from this country living in Vienna is up to 200,000. Yeah, Valentin knows figures. We are all guessing between 120 legally defined and altogether maybe more. So why did I mention these 2 groups of issues? One is the EU in change, in the process of change, and another one, the depopulation, because it's all about investments. I mean, if you are dealing with the economy, you will soon be faced with the problems which are a result of the massive depopulation, which actually has nothing to do with political colors. When I was in the opposition, I was commenting on Milosevic, he is to blame. Then what I see, the process continues and there are no changes, unfortunately. And if you talk to these people, why are they leaving? They are bold. They are not any more usual suspects, meaning students going to study and never get back. Not even the very poor. When you are poor, you are stuck. So only those who are above the poverty line, thanks to the investment mainly coming from the EU as a part of the development aid, are able to look around, to get ready, and to leave. But when you talk to them, who are now living, they are 40, they have children, they are employed, they earn well by local standards. Well enough to be socially integrated and linked with the European countries and friends there, and now they're ready to leave. And when you ask them why, they will tell you bluntly. And this is what we've seen in Balkan Barometer. This is a survey. When you talk to them, it's eventually all about the rule of law. Broadly understood rule of law. Broadly understood meaning, I'm fed up with you politicians, all of you. That's the first line. Second one, look, 20 years back, I thought Bosnia and Herzegovina will be a decent country after the Dayton. I will not allow my newborn to spend another 20 years in this country. Same goes for Serbia. Same goes for other countries in the region. So this is the message. I will not allow him or her to follow this education system, this health system, this judiciary, and I'm gone. Maybe you can say they're arrogant, believing they're better than the society they're coming from, but they have all right to be. They're simply saying, I will not allow to spend another 20 years here. And therefore, it's a complex problem. Imagine you are in the government. What do you do for these people? The survey has proved that 70% of the citizens in the region believe that the governments do not fight corruption in full speed. 79% believe that the justice is served guided by political and party colors rather than constitutional laws. So this is proving the notion of the accession, and this is basics first, fundamental first. Therefore, whoever is in the government will have to look into this first. Why are these people leaving? Because, I mean, we're talking about people who should be fighting for an office. I mean, they're 40, in full power, educated, and are gone. So in my eyes, the key problem of the society today, including economic problem for the development, is the population, the number of people living. The second one, we really need to change our face, meaning to really reform deeper if we want to approach the citizens of the EU and the politicians of the EU in order to change this pattern. And the pattern now is first changes and redefinition of European Union, and only then maybe at certain point eventually membership for you. That's bold. And then we can have many nasty comments, and I'll stop with these two comments coming from our officials from the region. I will not name them, they're from the region. Marek, this may not be necessarily pleasing for you, but in London summit, in a gathering between the civil society and the ministers of foreign affairs from the region, one of the ministers was, actually there were three in a panel, they were asked, you know, in European Commission country report on your countries, there is a reference state captured. Do you know what the minister asked? Bluntly, openly in a panel. Come on guys, you're saying my country is captured? And at the same time, you have decided to move Berlin process to Poland? Don't talk to me. Silence in the room. No one knew what to say. It might be non-diplomatic, it might be vulgar, but it was not wrong. Therefore, no comments any further on state capture. The second is on China. Well, in Friends of Europe gathering last December, one of the prime ministers, when someone has said in a panel, well, the EU is still the only game in town, said, sorry guys, do you know what is in the offer that comes from China? It's not only money, it's lifelong power. This is what is in the offer. And once you're in power, it's not necessarily the worst offer you can get. So I just wanted to put a cloud into this debate in order to try very honestly to discuss how much more we need to do to really change the face of the countries in the region in order to speed up the accession process. And we are looking wrongly to European Commission as they are doing their best. We need to present ourselves with credible reforms now, with the credible reforms domestically, and we need to share this with our citizens and then with the citizens of the EU. But we need to be aware of the different environment, and I'm grateful to you, Anna, to bring in Russia, China, Turkey, Arab. So money coming from different parts of the world, which I welcome very much, but I believe we should try to constantly introduce the rules and regulations we are striving for, coming from the EU in the business we are doing, in order to save what we've got so far and improve economically and politically. Thank you very much, and sorry for a long speech.
Gorane, thank you very much for this elaborate and very clear set of messages. You said basically that the document, which in its title had giving a credible enlargement perspective. When the title was already a bit suspicious to me, frankly speaking, you know, a document saying that we're giving a credible enlargement perspective. Before that, it was probably uncredible. So now we're trying to make it look credible. Perspective that it was actually taken off the table, the 2025 accession plan. It was not adopted in Sofia. And that your suggestion is to continue pushing. The depopulation issue, which you mentioned, is probably the biggest problem. It's probably the biggest problem of each of these societies. And it's already in English schools, children learn about this phenomena of depopulation in the Balkans. It's a topic in their textbooks for 7th grade. Rule of law, I couldn't agree more. Rule of law, perception of corruption, and perception of justice deficiencies, which say we don't want to keep our children to live like we have lived We want better for our children, even in immigration, and even as maybe second, third class citizens, it's still better than to put up. We have managed ourselves, but we don't know how they will manage. That is the main problem. So now it is my true pleasure to announce Mr. Vuk Jeremic. Apart from being the youngest foreign minister of foreign affairs of Serbia, and probably at that time in Europe, and who is currently president of the People's Party, Vuk was also the Speaker of the General Assembly of the United Nations. So, Vuce, please address us.
Thank you very much, Milan, and I want to start out by saying how big of a privilege it is for me to be here to address the 18th summit, and great thanks to my dear friend Simeon for continuing to invite me. I really feel sentimental because I was involved in the organizing of the first one in 2001, and since then I also had a privilege to speak in my various capacities from year to year. These were fascinating discussions, and some of the points that Goran made really resonated with me. But this is obviously a very complex part of the world, and I guess there are some here in this room who are not from here. So every time that I look at a complex system, and that's perhaps my educational background, I try to revert to the fundamental forces to try and understand how we got here and how can we move further and in which direction. And like in nature, where you go to forces of physics and chemistry in order to understand. When it comes to geopolitics, you go back to geography and history and important corollaries such as culture. And if you take a step back and if you look at this part of the world from really a galactic perspective, this has always been a part of Europe that was important and essential for everyone who ever had an ambition to project power or goods or people from the north to the south of the continent, or from the south to the north of the continent. And this has been the case since before the emergence of Christianity and Islam. I mean, since the Romans, this has been the case, and then Crusaders and Ottomans and many others. So this has always been a highway of empires, but also a buffer to empires. Some people were hoping to move through this part of European geography, and some others tried to stop them from doing that. So I believe that the historically two geopolitical aggregate conditions of the Balkans outside war. So in peace, you're either a highway or a buffer. And I am afraid that the current generation, the current years, start looking increasingly more like a buffer and not like a highway. And I'm now going to try and go down to earth and go down to observation of what we have in practical terms in Serbia and in the rest of the region. And this is going to be my first, not a rebuttal, but an observation of what Ambassador Fabrizi said, that EU integration brings stability. And I couldn't agree more. EU integration does bring stability. But the question is whether the current form and shape of EU integration process brings Serbia and the rest of Europe any closer to membership in the European Union. Quite frankly, I I believe it doesn't. And I believe Serbia is very much engaged in the process, and Serbia is now deep into chapters, and Serbia talks and works with European leadership at various levels, that is for sure. But for those of us who live here, some of the, pardon my subjectivity, truths that I'm going to say and spell out are self-evident. And I think that if Serbia is getting closer to Europe, it's perhaps close to Hungary when it comes to the overall conditions and criteria inside a society, and not so much some of the other European states. And I know that you do look into this, and you even list it as an issue to be addressed in reports. But I think that it is a quite drastic situation in certain fields, especially when it comes to the freedom of expression, when it comes to media freedoms and the rule of law. And also democracy in general, the chance to exchange views and thoughts between different parties, between government and the opposition in front of an audience. Today is my good friend Goran's birthday, and today is also a first birthday of a party that I created together with like-minded friends about a year ago. We celebrated this yesterday, but I don't know if I'm going to surprise too many people if I say that in the last 1 year, as the leader of perhaps small but very vigilant opposition party, I have not had a single chance to appear on any of the TV stations with the national frequency, public broadcasting, state or private. Perhaps I wasn't the most interesting interlocutor, so maybe I'm too boring as a speaker or as someone who could contribute to the public information, but this is also the case with each and every other colleague of mine from the opposition. And when I say opposition, I mean real opposition, not opposition that is somewhere in between the opposition and the government. So it's not about me, I think it's about the system. As a matter of fact, I'm a very patient and persistent person, so I write letters every 2 weeks. Every 2 weeks I write a letter to the head of the RTS, and to the head of Politika, and to the head of Večernje Novosti, and to many others. And every 2 weeks I write a polite letter asking him for a meeting, him or her for a meeting. And I have a stack of letters. There are over 20 of letters each, and every 2 weeks there is a letter going out. I was never granted a meeting, let alone a second, on a television with a national frequency. And in this part of the world where people are very conservative and where the demographic picture is the way Goran described, about 70% of people, at least according to polls, they pick their information from mainstream television, that is terrestrial television channels. So it's an issue. And when it comes to democratic exchange, again, it's been a year since I've had not a chance to exchange views with anybody from the government. And I was really hoping that Minister Joksimovic was going to be here at this breakfast, but something was telling me that she was not gonna show up for this breakfast. Of course, maybe she was busy, and I have no information about her schedule. But I can tell you as an example, and pardon me for using my own example, I have not had a chance to talk to anybody from the from the government in the last 1 year, at any place, in front of any audience. And again, I'm not the only one from the opposition, so it's probably not about me, it's probably about the system. Now, I fail to see how can this be hopeful? How can this be promising when it comes to building a society that may, in the near future, be ripe for European accession, in whichever shape or form? Because, as we know, the accession to Europe is only going to take place unless there is a change of views in France and in other member states, only after the European reforms are conducted. The fact that we are going in the wrong direction overall is worrying for me, because the way I look and the way I analyze the current system and the current government, I don't think that they have reverse gear. So if they're accelerating in the wrong direction, and that's my considered view, I think it's a problem, because there's no way to go back if you do not have a reverse gear. And I think this is something worth thinking about and exploring. And what I'm really worried is that as an external observer, trying to be an external observer, I see Europe repeating a similar mistake to the one, and somebody would say this was never a mistake, but in my opinion this was a mistake, and its relationship with Turkey about 10 to 15 years ago. And I remember a different discourse, a different kind of relationship between Turkey and the EU at that time. And there was a very big EU integration ministry in Turkey, and they were working very closely with Brussels and the member states. But things were in reality not going in the right direction when it comes to the future of EU-Turkey relationship, let alone accession. And I remember being a friend of EU integration minister of Turkey at that time. And as his guest, we had a nice luncheon in Ankara, and then he told me quite frankly, like, look, we're pretending that we are acceding. They're pretending that they are taking us. In reality, we're not. But it works very well for both of us to stay in the process. The rest was history. Turkey has been going away from the direction of European accession, and at some point the gap became too big. So everybody started stating the obvious. I'm not trying to say that Serbia or the Balkans is Turkey. It's close, but different. And I don't think that the future of the Balkans in the context of EU accession is as hopeless as Turkey's, at least short term. I think it can be fixed. But when a Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Western Balkans, as Goran says, talks about China and how attractive China is because they're talking about lifelong power that comes from engagement with China, that means money. I think it would be wrong for the European Union to try and compete with that in a sense. No, we're going to give you lifelong power. Don't take China's money. We're going to make sure that you stay in power lifelong. So better stay in power lifelong with us than stay in power lifelong with China. It's not about China or the EU. It's about staying lifelong in power, which is deeply wrong and disturbing, and it cannot work for the better of a country or the region. And as we know, staying lifelong in power is an option. Look at Montenegro. When I say lifelong, I mean 20, 30 years. That's lifelong in politics. So staying lifelong in power is not unachievable, as we know from the region. And I am afraid that our current generation of rulers in Serbia and perhaps elsewhere are in this mental mode of being ready to stop at nothing to stay in power and trampling democratic principles and institutions and some fundamental freedoms if necessary. Now, I can understand the logic of maintaining stability short term or trying to find solutions to decade-long and generational problems in the region that involve borders, means, etc. I can understand the attractiveness of this, but if one wants to think long-term, and if one goes back to the bird-eye perspective of the Balkans, I am afraid that the current trajectory is leading us into the cementing of a buffer aggregate condition as opposed to the highway aggregate position, one of the two that have historically been known to us. European Union has an enormously important role to play if this is not to happen, which I very much hope. And I'm sure that there'll be some sort of rebuttals to what I say, but then again, I was very, very grateful for an opportunity to say it aloud and in front of such a distinguished audience. Thank you.
I want to thank you, Vuce, for this speech. And I just want to emphasize, when we just listened to the panelists which we have here around this table, I want to emphasize what Mr. Insko said, the depth of the talent in this region. We really have discussions which are world-class around this table, and I want to thank you all dearly for making such a wonderful contribution. Vuce, you have mentioned the question of a clogging of public speech in the country, basically, that there is no debate in the country, and the worry which you express about the possibility of having a democracy in a situation where you do not have a single second on any of the national televisions. That is a very important thing. You have a feeling that the Western Balkans are more and more used as a buffer zone. And I must agree that to a certain extent I personally do agree with you, and we have to find a way somehow of living in that situation and finding a way through the situation to do best for our nations here in the Balkans. You also mentioned the power games, the realpolitik between the lifelong in power promises, And you know, looking at the big world today, you know, there was Rome, and there was the Republic, and then there were the times of the emperors, and then came the Middle Ages. So we grew up in a times when we expected that things will go better. But look at those who were a generation or two generations ahead of us, who survived 1939, 1940, 1941, the arrival of communism. It was dark ages. It was truly dark ages, and life does not always go in a positive way. But we should try our best to try to devise a path, at least to curb the damage if in some way the whole world is somehow leading in that direction. With this, I would kindly invite Dr. Marek Dabrowski, the non-resident scholar at Bruegel, to take the table.
Thank you very much, Milan. I would also like to thank Simeon for inviting me for this very interesting event. It's not easy to speak as the last panelist in the panel of so many distinguished experts and policymakers having first-hand experience from the region. So my role will be rather to share my outside experience as independent expert who spent quite a lot of my life in trying to support economic and institutional reforms in countries of the region. And let me first address the question of perspectives. While I must agree with Goran that Sofia Declaration could be seen disappointing and probably fell out of expectation of countries of the region, but I would not totally play down. Let me read the paragraph 2, which I just opened, recalling the Thessaloniki summit of 2003, the EU reaffirms its unequivocal support for the European perspective of the Western Balkans. I think that taking all, I would say, diplomatic jargon of the EU is quite straightforward declaration, which was lacking before. So basically, personally, I would see perspective of completing the EU accession process of the region more optimistic or less pessimistic that it could be 2 years or 3 years ago, when really the EU commitment, incumbent EU member states' commitment to continue Thessaloniki process was under question. Saying that, I would say that without any doubt, the completion of accession process will take time and will not be easy and be much more difficult in comparing to the previous enlargements for many reasons. One of them is that EU today is more comprehensive, sophisticated, and more political bloc that used to be in 1990s or early 2000s. Then another situation around us in Europe and the world. So there is, and there is also some experience with previous enlargement, not always totally positive and totally optimistic. I will come back to this question. So taking all these factors together, the perspective is not easy, but still is reliable, in my opinion, and is easy to take an effort, not only because the membership in EU itself for Serbia, for Montenegro, for all other countries is worth to accomplish, but also for the sake of the development of each country individually, because all these reforms, economic, institutional, political, are also important for right functioning of every country. And looking from this point of view, as I said, the enlargement process, accession will be more difficult and will be different than it was, for example, under the big wave of 2004 accession. If I try to recall this process in countries of Central Europe, at that time the main, I would say, sticking points and main controversies were around, I would say, traditional economic integration agenda, common agriculture policy, competition policy. In my home country, Poland, for example, the big excitement was the problem of the scale of increasing excise tax for tobacco because of the interest of tobacco producer lobby and this kind of things. I think that these things are still important, but not so much important in this region. Partly because Western Balkan countries did already some basic homework under stabilization association treaties, which were much more ambitious in terms of economic institutional integration than trade and association treaties were in the case of Central Europe, European countries or Baltic countries, but also because of the experience learned during the previous round of accession. So what is important? First thing, which is, there are things which are not outrightly written in the treaties, but I think it's absolutely crucial, dealing with geopolitics and legacy of the past. And there are things very difficult for each country, but I think that must be done. And I would say, fortunately, started to be moved forward. I mean, for example, the starting process of sorting out the conflict between Greece and Macedonia. And another big issue is, of course, normalization of Serbia-Kosovo relation, and then other things which High Representative talked of us is progress in internal Bosnia reconciliation. All this are legacy of the tragic decade of 1990s. But they are very important. not only for domestic and regional politics, but also for perception, which this region is seen in Western Europe, for example. And the big issue which was addressed by Goran, I think there's really a problem, but living partly in Western Europe, I must say that one of the things which I think is considered as a challenge in many countries is that accepting EU membership of Western Balkan countries may risk involving entire Europe in some sort of historical legacy. So also for this reason, these legacies must be sorted out sooner, it's better. Then another problem, which first time was, I think, put to the forefront during Bulgaria and Romania accession. It's the question stability of institution, rule of law, fighting corruption, etc. But now it's even more. Unfortunately, in the light of very unfortunate experience of Hungary and Poland, with questioning some basic democracy, rule of law. And again, 20 years ago, when Eastern accession started, the assumption was that once countries manage to transform themselves from communist dictatorship and build democracy, this is accomplishment forever. It will not be returned. Now, unfortunately, in the light of this experience which I mentioned, but also in rising populist forces in various other countries of Europe and the world, this starts to be seen as the real challenge. Especially that when we look closely in the treaty, there is no, unlike, for example, in case of single market, where there is various kind of enforcement tools. In case of the basic rules and fundamental rights, there is Article 7, but now as test in case of Poland and Hungary, it seems that it's not easy mechanism to adopt. So again, I think that the dominant mood of incumbents will be that we must be absolutely sure that candidate countries will not involve risk of this kind of backlash which happened in Poland and Hungary. Especially then when we look, this is also part of the, I would say, real perceptions, and we look in the international rankings like Freedom House or Bertelsmann Foundation. Unfortunately, also countries of this region backslided a bit in the terms of this fundamental rights, basic rule of law, democratic institutions. Serbia is still the best among these countries, but also suffer a bit downgrade in these rankings. I don't want longer comment on this, but this is also another important part of the situation. Of course, then is a huge still area of economic and economic institution questions, which are, I think, extensively covered by most of 35 chapters, negotiation chapters. And some of them, like competition, for example, are not easy in any case, or agriculture policy, but I think that probably relatively they are easier to complete, especially for countries which have already experienced living under the regime of stabilization association agreement. Then, of course, EU also must complete some task, reform task. And here be clear, probably the major issue is that its institution must be adjusted to the number of member states, which will be eventually higher than 30. I mean, number of commissioners, of the internal structure of the commission and voting rights and all these other things. But this is also unclear how quickly this kind of reforms can be completed. But I think that it cannot serve excuse of not intensifying internal regional effort within this region. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Dabrowski. Thank you, and thank you so much for taking the time to come to Belgrade. Now, slowly, we should go into the second part of the panel, which is the discussion about what we have talked and maybe some other issues as well. And I will just raise, yes? Yes, please, make a comment.
Thank you. Not just to prevent the discussion, but just to react on some of the points that's been made. I kept very short in my beginning, so allow me, Chair, to make few comments. And I won't pretend to cover all of them, but I really thanks for the contribution and suggestion. I understand that the EU was the subject and the focus of this discussion. So in terms maybe of timing, as been said, there's a sense of the frustration, how long the process of enlargement takes. I would say very frank that for us the speed is given by the reforms. There's no time frame which we say before that time you are not ready or before that time you cannot enter. It's a question of the speed that is being given by the reform. And the Commission put forward a date, 2025. It's not a date, it's an encouragement. I mean, the proof is there, certainly. We said it's ambitious, but is feasible. In terms of what our High Representative said, I'm not into the BH negotiation environment. I'm just in charge of the Serbian one. I can say that chapter 23, 24, so the fundamental rule of law has been put up front. We didn't wait the closer of the negotiation. We said up front since the beginning, just to mention how much was serious for us, the recognition that a lot of work needed to be done. They needed to cover a number of ground. In terms of funds are always welcome, but we also look at the fund we already had put in. So in the past 10 years, we put 200 million euro grant per year. EIB put nearly 4 billion euro in investment, and the member state, in terms of investment of a company, put 6 billion. If you add up, we are at 13 billion euro. I don't think it's a small number, so before asking for more fund, which is good, because also the Commission is planning to have an increase financial envelope in the next financial framework, adding 20% more, asking the member state to put 20% more for enlargement. So the funds are there. I don't think it's only a question of fund. Third point, what Anna correctly said, the question of language. I mean, I think the new narrative, the new jargon is narrative. Of course, we all be better in terms of our communication is an effort that we do. I try to focus on numbers, not to become abstract, but on the export has increased, investment has increased, employment went down, economy has grown. I agree with you. At the end of the day, we always talk about economy, growth, an opportunity. I think is the message is there, but I think we also need the help of each and everybody of us to make a positive narrative. Otherwise, it looks like that the proof, the honor of the proof is on the EU side. We accept our responsibility, of course, but I think we need a collective policy narrative within the EU. Somebody was said before, in the good old days, all reform needed to be done for Brussels. Right now, the problems are because of Brussels. So I think we need to be a little bit more coherent with what we say and what we want. In terms of investment from other countries, 73% is the investment we brought for the EU side. I think is a good number. We are not afraid of investment from other countries. On the contrary, we want investment from all over the world. What we want is the investment that follow the rule. We have rule within the EU, state aid, public procurement, transparency. A country or group of countries who accede in the EU should play by the same rule, as simple as that. So as long as the foreign investor bring fund, asset, knowledge, skills in the same framework or rule, we are happy. The growth of this region is our growth. If this region is happy, we are happy. But we cannot accept that because of other reasons, you introduce shortcutting rules, you create divergence and distortion in the market, This is something which is not set from countries who want to accede. In terms of the ERBD discussion, of course, there's a number of, I'm not across all the detail, but we have the European Investment Bank with an unlimited lending capacity, a very good conditionality, and in line with an accession country. We are there to support the accession by loan and by grant. The grants and the investment should go towards an agenda which is an accession agenda. That's why our objective is to everything that is conducive to accession. The following point is the discussion of the agenda, the incredible, the Commission agenda and the discussion into the summit. If you look at the Sofia Declaration, all the flagship initiative, all the concrete initiative, just to not remain in the vagueness, came from the Commission Western Balkans. So there's a little bit of discussion among experts who read the document. By the end of the day, if we are working on connectivity, on digital, on Erasmus, on Horizon 2020, Commission ideas are, and Sofia Declaration is. So just to make it clear. In terms of what Vuk said is the process. Of course, I accept the challenge is the process bringing Serbia closer to the EU. I would say in my introduction I made, certainly on the economic side, I said yes, the reform taking roots, fundamentals are there. Economic is back. 4-5% is not bad, but what I said at the beginning is need to be sustainable, need to go to reduce the gap, and there's a lot of work to be done. I said on transparency, on state-owned enterprise, and so on and so forth. On the other areas, we have been also very clear in our report. Fundamental first means fundamental first. Human right, freedom of media, independent judiciary, and I think our report has been clear. We've not been criticized to being so clear. So sometimes we also have to agree if the jargon is correct or not. When we are clear, we are criticized. If we are not clear, we criticize. So I think in that sense we have been very clear, and we said what we think. Stronger government, stronger opposition. Check and balance. This is what the European Union is about, and I think that was clear. Reform before enlargement. I think we made it also clear this point. The reform within the EU is a parallel process to the enlargement. We shouldn't be thinking that the EU want to reform and after enlargement. We never said it. We said it's a parallel process, and we have to work on both of them. Maybe finally, another point: the population is a problem of this region, as many other parts of the world. But it's also a question of demography. It's a question of migration. It's a question is to have a country where traveling should be an opportunity and not a necessity. The EU is based on the freedom of movement of people all around Europe, so we encourage people to leave. But we encourage people to leave because it is an opportunity, not because of a necessity. And that's why we push for reform that makes sense, that give growth and give opportunity to the people to stay, to leave and to come back, but certainly not becoming a necessity. The final point is, Goran said that the countries of the Western Balkans failed to convince the leaders. I'm not sure. We don't go so far. I think we said basically we are committed. Has been said, has been quite crystal clear, mutually recommitted. But of course we said we want to see facts on the ground. The implementation of the Prespa agreement is will be fact on the ground. If we solve Kosovo and Belgrade, will be a fact on the ground. If the reform of the rule of law will be done, will be facts on the ground. So in that sense, Europe is not saying a vague element. It's linked to concrete fact. That's why we call merit-based reform process. And I think also the first June Council gave good signal. I mean, said in 2019 we can open negotiation with Tirana and former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia. We can give a status candidate to Bosnia. Of course, there's a process need to be done. But again, and I agree with who said, it's not we and you. I think we need to have a collective sense of ownership. It's us. We are doing things together. So as long as we do things together in terms of reform, in terms of narrative, in terms of political commitment, in terms of consistency, I think we are on the right process. If we start to talk about us and you, means that the ownership is not there and the element of partnership is lost. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fabrizi. I will try to give also some thoughts. We heard a huge number of very important messages sent here. The question of depopulation is literally on the level of a bleeding wound here in the Balkans, a bleeding wound. As Goran noted, the absence of, or the perverted rule of law is probably in the basis, and the unprotected human rights, and the undeveloped economy, which cannot develop in such an unpredictable legal system. Simply, people are afraid to invest their money in an unpredictable environment where they do not know how the courts will adjudicate. We have a situation that the European Union is saying the following. We have probably made some concessions with Bulgaria and Romania. We don't want to repeat that. We have a set of rules which must be abided, and as you progress, that will your accession will move forward. Now the question is, are the elites ruling the Balkan countries at all fundamentally interested in improving democracy and rule of law? And if the answer is in the negative, we are blocked. We're all blocked. The wound is bleeding. The people are leaving Serbia, leaving Bosnia, leaving Macedonia, leaving Croatia, leaving Bulgaria, which again, as Goran, you said, it's not directly attached to the integration. So if eventually, in some time in the future, we manage to achieve all the criteria which are well set, which are very well set, there will be very few people who will enjoy such a rule of law in the next 50 years when that eventually happens. Now, obviously the process is being challenged, and obviously that there is a strong opposition among many countries in the European Union for the Western Balkans to accede. There is probably a bit more opposition to Serbia than for other countries, maybe for some historical reasons, maybe for some little Russia argument, where we're actually accepting a country which is very, very close to Russia, political arguments and so forth. The question is, first of all, there is absolutely no doubt that the prospect of the European Union is by far the best perspective for the Balkans, and that there is nothing to compete that perspective. If that cannot be achieved, if we cannot have a merger, that one company becomes part of another company, an acquisition, can we go into a franchise arrangement? Can we go into a subsidiary arrangement? Can we become a second-class wagon in the same train? We don't have necessarily to travel all in first class and drink champagne in that first-class train. Can we travel in the second class but still be together, pushed by the same engine? Can you offer something to Serbia and other countries in the region within the next 24 months, which will be an agreement for a franchise, that our ministers join the most of the bodies of the European Union, do not have a voting right, that we structure, it's a matter of negotiations. You are now going to have a situation that the UK will leave the European Union. And that marriage between the European Union and UK was a marriage probably for both sides, and particularly for the British, out of interest. It was a marriage out of interest. With the British leaving the European Union, you will have a lot more of unanimity than you had actually before with them in it. Balkans is very small. It can be easily grasped. It can be easily absorbed. It's cheap. It's poor and cheap to absorb. Let's go and make a structure which is not an integration, but which is a transitory structure, contractual by nature, which will give a clear benefit of civilizing the Balkans, of integrating the politicians and those elites which we are not sure whether they really want to become the Balkans. Can we structure something like that? I don't have a clear solution in mind, but we need to be creative and not, as Vuk said, you know, we say they're pretending that they want us and we pretend that we want to join, and the people are leaving the country. And we will only have the politicians left and the poorest, people who cannot leave. Let's find a transitory stage that will not reduce us to a buffer zone, as you, Vuče, said, but give a true perspective to these people. Give the Balkans an offer, as Don Corleone said, which cannot be refused. Give the Balkans an offer that the politicians will be unable to reject. Be creative. You will have much more peace in the Balkans. You will spend less money. And the Balkans will be much less of a problem than the UK was. And I just have to invite kindly Mrs. Mihaela Osorio. Mrs. Mihaela Osorio, because we had a problem that Mr. George Chamba, the state secretary of Romania, could not attend. So Mihaela, who is the charge d'affaires of the Romanian embassy, will just make a brief statement in the name of Mr. George Chamba, the state secretary of Romania.
Mr. Moderator, thank you very much. On this note, I'll try to be very brief. So State Secretary Chamba really wanted to be here today, and he was prevented to do so last minute, but there are a couple of messages that he found very important to be passed for this audience. And they do complement some of the great exchange of ideas that we had here this morning. So let me start by affirming Romania's commitment to advance the enlargement process as one of the priorities during its future EU Council presidency in the first semester of 2019, building on the work of our Bulgarian and Austrian colleagues. In this respect, our principled position remains that the accession partners should be assessed individually on their own merits with due consideration to the existing and agreed criteria. During our presidency, we will continue to promote a constructive approach, favoring the opening of new negotiation chapters based on the progress made in fulfilling the existing conditionalities. Generating a solid track record of progress, especially regarding the most complex chapters 23 and 24, will have a decisive effect on the rhythm of the entire process. It is our view that a regional approach to implementing economic projects in Western Balkans offers the greatest of possible impact and fosters cooperation. Allow me to share some of the regional initiatives Romania takes part in, which are also relevant for the Western Balkans. Yes? Closer to mic. Closer to mic, okay. So the first one is the 3 Cs initiative, which is an economic, needs-driven platform of cooperation. It focuses on reducing development gaps between participating countries and the rest of the EU and on promoting cohesion. It aims at more convergence by fostering higher connectivity in Central and Southeastern Europe in 3 key fields: transport, energy, and digital. The initiative is pro-economic development via enhanced interconnectivity, pro-EU, and pro-transatlantic. So I would like to mention here the first business forum under this initiative, which took place in Bucharest about a month ago, which is a format that can bring together and can bring a positive spillover effect on the entire region. The initiative is designed to help participants facilitate and capitalize on the overall economic development and reach convergence with the EU. In that sense, I would like to further encourage countries and partners from the Western Balkans to take part in the 3Cs initiative. Another of these regional formats which Romania strongly encourages its Western Balkan partners to take part in is the European Union strategy for the Danube. Romania will take over its annual presidency as of 1st of November 2018, and as such it aims to relaunch the strategy by increasing the political input and stimulating the interest at technical level for developing more transnational projects. Romania will also chair the strategy at the same time with chairing the EU Council, and in this respect it aims to have a debate on the future financial framework on this subject. However, none of these objectives can be achieved if efforts stop at EU borders. In that sense, we expect to receive inputs of all participating countries for invigorating cooperation within the strategy for the Danube region and beyond, so that our successful projects can become a testbed for the macro-regional model. Therefore, Romania also promotes very much interconnectivity in the region, and in this regard, energy is a major topic of interest. I would mention only one of the priorities in this regard, and that is the absolute and clear commitment to the Brua gas pipeline, which is a major importance for our energy security, and it contributes to diversifying resources. Ladies and gentlemen, in light of our future EU Council presidency, we encourage countries in the region to make the most of the current window of opportunity and to enable positive evolutions that would reflect in the Commission's enlargement package, setting the path for favorable Council conclusions on the enlargement process next year. Therefore, it is up to the Western Balkan countries to identify the actions that they are most interested in and to suggest projects according to their priorities. A stabilized and integrated region brings advantages also to our Union as a whole. Thank you very much.
Mrs. Osoria, thank you very much. Charge d'Affaires of the Romanian Embassy, talking in the name of Mr. George Ciamba, State Secretary of Romania. We have to adjourn very soon, basically, because at 12:30, the conference is formally being opened by the first Deputy Prime Minister, Mr. Ivica Dačić, and also by the Minister of Energy and Mining, Mr. Antić. So just to conclude, I would kindly ask for a 1 minute, just briefest remark to close the session from each of our panelists. Gorane, could you maybe start that we go in around?
I laugh at myself when you say 1 minute, but I'd like now to tell you a brief story on a completely different and very positive note. What really has a convincing power is what do we do here in the region, convincing towards the leaders and the citizens of the EU. In Trieste, a year and a half back, we have agreed on this new multi-annual action plan or regional economic area. It was drafted by the Regional Cooperation Council. It is creating not really a custom union nor a single market, but it is getting close to this. I've tested this, talking to those who are very far from being very open towards the accession in the EU, And they find this as one of these convincing elements when they realized that the region was able to agree on full free trade in both commodities and services. They open an eye. When they realize that the region is able to agree on the roaming following the EU roaming among ourselves, and we hope that here in April in Belgrade we're going to host a digital summit, and we will there hopefully extend the existing roaming agreement so make it a full and inclusive for the 6 economies for the Western Balkans. When they realize that we provide for a full mobility when it comes to automatic recognition of diplomas and professional qualifications, and we are going to sign this in Poland in the context of the Berlin process, then they are much more open. So this is happening. I just wanted to send one message for those of you who are in business rather than in diplomacy. The region is actually moving gradually, but faster than you believe, towards creating something very close to the idea of a common market on the way toward joining the EU. And this is really happening, and the year 2019 is going to be a delivery year here. So this gives a completely different and positive spin as we are doing this for us and in close cooperation with the European Union. So the benefits will be seen, and we tend to forget, but we are in Serbia. Serbia earns money in Bosnia and Herzegovina. We sell a whole lot of good to Kosovo, whether we call it export or not, it's a political issue, but we are selling more than to Russia or China or US. So be realistic and look where the money comes from. And this is Bosnia and Herzegovina, Kosovo, Albania. And then the wider region. So this is where our life is, and this is really happening. This is why some of these outstanding issues are to be solved rather sooner than later, and there we need to be decisive. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I couldn't agree more. I have signed the CEFTA agreement, actually. So it works well. Vuce, please.
Does it have to be on a good note? On a positive one?
It must be.
Well, definitely, it was a fascinating discussion, and I really appreciate all the interventions, and I also appreciate Ambassador's comments on the fact that the European Commission did start writing about difficult things when it comes to progress reports, and that's certainly a very important development if we want to be honest, and if we really want to see things moving in a positive direction in the Balkans. But let's be very, very honest and realistic. Those nuances, we have started to realize that the diplomatic language has started very, very slowly to change when it comes to addressing the weaknesses. That's not understood by the population. It's understood by diplomats or people with a diplomatic background. What is much more powerfully and clearly understood are the warm embraces of our current leadership, which happen usually to coincide prior to a highly irregular electoral process. What becomes much more noticed and memorable is when the European Council President comes to Belgrade, and in a very good Serbian, and I'm very pleased that the European Council President speaks such a good Serbian, when he comes out and says, Alexander Vučić is my soulmate, and he's the greatest Serb I've ever met. Now, that is something that tends to stick in memory of an ordinary folk much more powerfully than I would say correct and honest reports that the European Commission is making, and I very, very much hope that they're going to continue doing this. But we're talking politics. We're talking a situation in which there needs to be built a political will to go towards certain kinds of reforms that would theoretically make Serbia capable of joining the EU through the fulfillment of the Copenhagen criteria. That is not happening. And I'm not going to make any comments on the economic numbers. I think that there are different optics that can also be introduced, but I agree that perhaps in the economic field things are not as